In this third segment, we're going to talk about Jimmy Butler and the little situation going on with the Miami Heat. And yeah, I personally, I saw this coming. Eventually, this was going to happen. It was just a matter of time for me. And like I knew it. I'm sure most of the Miami fans knew this. It was really just a matter of time for when Jimmy Butler was going to request a trade. And I'll explain why I knew this. I got notes for this. So, and I also said this before in a past segment when I was talking about the Miami Heat and their situation with their team. So now I'm just pulling up my notes real quick. Give me 1 second. All right. So the Miami Heat 5 years ago, their best players were Bam, Jimmy, and Tyler Hero. 5 years later, their best players are Bam, Jimmy, and Tyler Hero. This team, this Miami Heat team, has been unable to make moves to bring in free agents and bring in a competent team that allows the Miami Heat to compete. They have been unable to do that. And you guys, I know some of you guys might say, oh, well, I mean, the Heat, they've been able to make the finals several years, and it's not really Jimmy Butler's fault that the team is not good enough to win in the finals. It is partly his fault because he did underperform against the Denver Nuggets. One thing that is the biggest myth is playoff Jimmy Butler. He is not real. Every single time Jimmy Butler plays in the playoffs, he plays fantastic in the first round and then lays an egg in every other round. He's done that before. The only time where he hasn't done that was against the Lakers. And that even then, that one was a surprise. But against the Denver Nuggets, it was all his fault for the reason why the Miami Heat were losing, because he played terribly. He played horrible ball. Terrible basketball. But that's besides the point. The situation remains the same. The Miami Heat, they have been unable to acquire new pieces and make themselves better. Look at what the Celtics have been able to do. Despite the fact that the Celtics are constantly making it to the Eastern Conference Finals every single year, they always try to make moves and look to improve. They ended up getting Kristaps and Drew Holiday a year ago, and that ultimately proved successful because they ended up winning the finals with them and other teams. The Bucks, they moved on from Drew Holiday, and they were able to acquire Damian Lillard, despite the fact that Chris Middleton has been lacking as well. Other teams that have made moves. Now, again, like the Thunder, a few years ago, they had Russell Westbrook and Paul George. They went ahead and they got rid of them, and they rebuilt, and they've established a winning culture in OKC. All of these teams have made, in fact, not all of, in most of the teams in the NBA, they have made championship-changing moves, and they have made moves that actually better their franchise. The Miami Heat, they haven't done any of that in the last 5 years. And it's like they're just trying to rely on this Heat culture to bring them all the way to the finals and to win in the finals in the end. And personally, I would have gotten sick of that. I would have gotten sick of that if I was Jimmy. Now, granted, this is not the reason why Jimmy Butler is requesting a trade, which is the problem that I have with Jimmy Butler. I like the fact that he's requesting a trade because he does not belong in Miami. He does not deserve to be there. The team is wasting his talents. However, the reason for him wanting to leave, is more selfish than that. He wants to leave because Miami isn't willing to offer him an extension. And to be honest, I wouldn't do that either. Look at how Paul George is playing with the extension that he has. I mean, the 76ers, they moved on from Tobias Harris, and they went ahead and acquired Paul George. And Paul George is playing worse than Tobias Harris this season. it's really bad for Paul George. It's bad for the 76ers in general, to be honest. But this situation is not making Jimmy's situation any better, because teams are going to be less likely to pay for them, to pay for Jimmy, as opposed to after looking at what's going on with Paul George now, right? And at the same time, however, I understand what Jimmy's mindset is going to. He's going to like, okay, well, Paul George is making all of this money, and I think I'm playing better than Paul George, so give me more money than him. Like, that's the argument that they can use. And this is the problem when we give players like Paul George all of this money. This is the main problem, and this is something that should not happen. Players should not be making all of this money. They should not. But that is besides the point. I agree with the trade. I just don't agree with the reason for the trade. Now, what teams could actually fulfill this trade? That you guys might be asking. Well, one of the teams on the trade rumors was the Sacramento Kings, which I think is a terrible idea, and I don't think that the Kings are going to do this trade, because the problem with the Kings is their lack of defense and the three-point shooting. Now, Jimmy is a solid defender, but he's getting older now, so I don't think his defense is going to be as good as what it was. Not to mention, he is also a ball-dominant player who doesn't shoot as many threes as you would like, meaning that the Kings situation would not benefit with Jimmy Butler in the slightest. So I don't think the Kings are one of them, but a team that actually might be a good fit for him, to be honest, would be the Golden State Warriors. That would make the most sense. A 3-team trade between Golden State, the Raptors, and the Miami Heat, that would make the most sense. This is a trade proposal from The Athletic saying that the Heat acquire Bruce Brown Jr. From the Raptors, Dennis Schroeder, Gary Payton, and Gary Payton II, 1 first-round pick and 1 second-round pick from the Warriors. The Raptors would acquire Andrew Wiggins and Gui Santos, and the Warriors would acquire Jimmy Butler. That would make the most sense. Excuse me. The Warriors, they've been struggling recently. They believed that their roster wasn't going to be able to maintain the amount of success that it has in the beginning of the season. I did not think that they were going to be any sort of contenders going into later this year, and I've been proven right once again. And this trade would make the most sense, giving Steph Curry someone else to legitimately play with and giving Jimmy a chance to win again. Another team that could end up working would be the Houston Rockets. They have the assets that could legitimately trade for Jimmy Butler. A 3-team trade between those two teams as well as the Brooklyn Nets. The Heat would acquire Bojan Bogdanovic, DeAnthony Melton, Zaire Williams, first-round pick and a second-round pick from the Nets. They would get Jeff Green and a first-round pick and a second-round pick from the Houston Rockets. Houston would acquire Jimmy Butler and Josh Richardson, along with Keon Johnson, and the Nets would acquire Jalen Green, Jock Landale, Jashawn Tate, and Aaron Holiday from the Houston Rockets. I don't think this would be an ideal trade for Brooklyn, but obviously it would be a much more ideal trade for those other two teams. I don't think that's going to happen just because I don't think the Nets are willing to do that and give up some of their draft capital, because they are going to try and commit to this rebuild. Now, one of the teams that I saw a possibility for, which would be a very big surprise, would be the Phoenix Suns. Trading away Bradley Beal, and then the Suns would acquire Jimmy Butler and Josh Richardson from the Heat. That would be a surprising swing, which I don't think it would be interesting seeing Jimmy Butler and Kevin Durant along with Devin Booker. That would be a much better fit, in my opinion, than having Bradley Beal. But again, age is a number unless you're LeBron. And Bradley Beal for the Miami Heat, I don't know if that's also going... I don't really see that as a benefiting move. Remember, Bradley Beal, when he's on a mediocre team, isn't really able to do much aside from put up 60 points. Remember when he was on Washington and he didn't do anything for Washington aside from put up really good numbers? I mean, when John Wall was out and he was the only one there, and when Russell Westbrook was on the team, they did not make the playoffs until Russell Westbrook got on the team. So, not a very ideal move for the Heat in that situation, but again, they'd probably have to deal with Jimmy Butler being a diva. And also, before I end off the segment, he ended up getting suspended from the Miami Heat and is most likely not going to play for like the next 10 games. Now, another potential landing spot before I end off the segment is the Memphis Grizzlies. That's another team that you should watch out for when looking at the a team that could acquire Jimmy Butler. But that's all that I have in this fourth segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into that's all I have for the third segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the fourth segment where I talk about the NFL wildcard matchups and my predictions for each of the teams that are going to play in the wild card as well as the results. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.